Parker, thank you for joining us today for our Fireside Chat series where we're going to get to know about you a little bit more, as well as the organization Rainbow Pride Youth Alliance that has come on board as a collaborative partner in delivering and supportive services to LGBTQIA plus populations and others. And so, again, I just want to thank you for making the time to be here. My name is Ruben Mendoza, and I serve as the Housing and Economic Analyst for the LaunchPad Collective. The LaunchPad is an innovative mixed-use, mixed-income model pushing the development status quo in San Bernardino by meeting the needs of the whole person and their families. We always say it takes a village to make this mission happen, and we certainly wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for the partnership, the work, and the support of our community partners like Rainbow Pride Youth Alliance. In this Fireside Chat series, really the purpose is to highlight the collaborative nature of our work and to showcase the various disciplines coming together for a common goal of seeing housing production reach the most in need within San Bernardino, but also providing a blueprint for conscious economic development. And so now it is my privilege to introduce AK Parker, who is the Clinical Director of Behavioral Health at Rainbow Pride Youth Alliance. Parker,
Awesome.
thank you for being here with us today. My first question to you is, can you please tell us about yourself, your professional background, and the organization Rainbow Pride Youth Alliance?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, Ruben. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you today. So, like you shared, my name is AK Parker. I go by my last name, Parker, and I am a Black, queer, non binary licensed mental health therapist. I'm also an expressive arts practitioner and educator. And I've spent a little over the last decade really helping to build behavioral health programs, harm reduction programs, and last year in particular, building out mobile and street outreach programs for youth who are facing some of the toughest circumstances in the Inland Empire. So a lot of my work is really dedicated to walking alongside folks who exist within the margins, and especially youth who exist within the margins and don't have access to what they might need to really thrive.
Parker, I know it's my understanding that Rainbow Pride Youth Alliance, that there's a special focus to also support those that may be experiencing some level of housing insecurity. Can you elaborate more as far as when a young person is in need? How does an organization like Rainbow Pride Youth Alliance provide intervention or preventative level services, if any? And can you give us an example of how that kind of circumstance, if you will, could take place at the Launchpad Collective?
Yeah, absolutely. So, to answer that question, I think it's important to kind of share a little bit more about RPYA and kind of our legacy as well. So, RPYA is the longest running LGBTQIA youth nonprofit in the IE. And we have really expanded our services to not only address the needs of queer and trans youth, but our most vulnerable youth. And we do that, one, by listening from the youth themselves and what they are telling us that they need. And so that's how RPY started. Back in 2001, a group of students came to a school teacher and shared with that teacher that they needed space to just be themselves, right? And that school teacher took initiative and built what was like a Friday night hangout where other youth who were struggling with their identity didn't have access to safe spaces. They could all convene and build a community together. And these little Friday night hangouts, it became really big, right? To where the school teacher was like, okay, we need to kind of organize around this and build a nonprofit around this. And that was the genesis and, the seed of RPYA was that school teacher listening to the youth and what they needed, and then built an organization to support those needs. And so over the past 25 years or so, because we are now at our 25-year mark this year, which is really exciting, RPYA has been more fluid and kind of morphed to the changing times, right? Every decade, might be different in regards to what, the youth are facing and what their needs are. And so what we found back in 2020, especially, the pandemic had a significant effect on the mental health and the well-being of our youth and the Inland Empire. And they told us that, they, one, didn't know how to navigate both the healthcare, but also the mental health care system, right? How do I do this? Who do I contact? How do I find somebody who sees me, right? And I'm not placed in these environments where I feel like I'm experiencing harm, right? How do I find an affirming provider? And so from this, we, decided to build our own like in-house clinical therapy program and services. Whereas before, I would say for the majority, maybe 20 years or so, it was predominantly peer support. So we had like support groups. We also did a lot of trainings to community based organizations or partnered with the school districts or GSAs, right, to provide that kind of learning opportunity and to also continue that process of community building. Starting in 2020, we laid the groundwork for, okay, there's a need for professional services, right? And one youth who have kind of been a part of this whole process of seeing that and was one of the youth that named that we had that they needed clinical therapy services, shared with me that they're like, one thing that I love about RPYA is that you all listen to us, right? They're like, it's crazy. I remember sharing with you that we needed therapy services, and now I'm meeting with my therapist and everything is going good with them, right? And so from that evolution of our therapy services and, some of our harm reduction work as well, and our data, I think data is really important. We saw that a lot of youth that were entering into our programs, they had both housing insecurity, food insecurity, and did not have access to transportation, right? And we had some evaluators over at UCLA and Cal State San Bernardino who looked at this data and said, okay, so with the percentage of youth who are entering into RPY that has housing insecurity, food and transportation barriers, they're also at higher risk of depression, anxiety, etc. Right? And so we were like, okay, the mental health therapy component is really important, but how do we address the barrier and access to care, right? Especially when looking at transportation. And how do we also address the housing insecurity too, right? How do we begin to meet youth where they are and to try to really address some of those barriers? And that is how our street outreach, program came about as well. With like, let's meet youth where they are. Let's get them connected to what they might need. And then let's also think about how we could be preventative, and really get them set up. And I think that that's where, our partnership with Launchpad really comes in as well. We want to continue to provide that legacy of culturally informed, trauma informed, intergenerational support for our youth and to really affirm, young people's full potential and to support their mental and emotional well-being. Yeah, in that process.
I really appreciated to learn more about the 25-year history and evolution of RPYA because it's all interrelated to this final form, if you will, that has taken on that is the 25th year version of RPYA that exists today. And I think of it as an entity that is really trying to address those real gaps, right? A lot of community members may not have access to basic health like therapy as some of your young people were requesting, and a nonprofit like RPYA comes into the community and is able to offer that at no expense to this young person. And that could be really transformational and both life saving, and it's not an exaggeration. I like how you closed out at the end with how that relates back to Launchpad and the partnership that's being formed because we have this trajectory of 2 to 5 years. There's an expectation of ownership, whether that's you owning your home, a business, or maybe potentially both. Taking really difficult, intense, sometimes intense situations or circumstances and turning them into ones of resilience, coupled with the necessary supportive services, right? And so housing insecurity, food insecurity, and mental health support, educational support, and it's a back and forth, right, between RPYA, Launchpad, its other partners that are coming together at the table.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that coming together is really important, you know. I love that you started the conversation with it takes a village, you know, and we all have different parts of the puzzle. And when we put it all together, you know, magic happens. So I'm really excited for this partnership with Launchpad.
Parker, is there something else that you would want folks to know about RPYA as it relates to the development of Launchpad that you might something you might want to touch on more or we haven't mentioned as of yet?
I think one thing that I would want people to know is that, you know, RPYA is really expanding beyond the traditional service delivery, kind of like what I mentioned earlier about how we are, you know, fluid and like to adjust to um, what is meeting the moment for our youth, right? And with that, I shared, you know, we are creating low barrier access to care and really elevating youth voices. But also, we want to develop, you know, youth leadership pathways and workforce development. And with this, we are thinking about developing and designing like social enterprise, right, within our organization. So if you look at models such as Homeboy Industries out in LA, right? Nonprofit organization, but they provide kind of these employment opportunities for their youth. And I think that what Launchpad is doing with being able to have like at the bottom floor different small businesses and different things like that, it could also be an opportunity for that social enterprise where you know youth are being able to learn like job readiness skills and you know be employed right there. And then you also have that, you know, housing piece. So I really feel like, you know, all of this complements Launchpad's approach. You know, as you all create mixed use communities with attainable housing and workforce opportunities, we bring that clinical relational support, you know, that really helps youth stabilize and thrive once they're there. So I'm really excited to work towards, you know, building that ecosystem where a young person can find housing, community, mental health care, opportunities, you know, for growth, all within that one supportive framework.
I think what we see a lot, and speaking from some experience in my time as a direct service provider, a lot of these resources tend to be fragmented or very far away from wherever this person that you're supporting is currently located. And we're bringing it all in together in one centralized location or locations in this case, multiple launch pads. And maybe there's some level of a ripple effect that can take place after. And you're absolutely right. We want to create this ecosystem that is within walking distance and housing paired with the commercial on the ground floor, the supportive services, workforce readiness, career placement. And these are jobs or employers would be considered almost kind of like a mom and pop, right? Like small business. That's not going to be like a major warehouse like Amazon or anything of that nature. So it's intent purposeful and yeah.
And I'm really excited for that because, you know, our youth deserve more than just like temporary fixes. You know, they deserve systems that's really built with them in mind from the beginning. And that's what
Mhm.
I could really see with, you know, Launchpad's initiative.
Yeah, I could see it. This is a model we like to say. You can't expect a young person to perform at their optimal levels if their basic needs aren't being met. And this is
Yeah.
what it's really boiling down to. Are those basic needs being met? And if not, what do we need to do right as organizations from an organizational standpoint to try to fill that need? And so
Mhm.
again, reiterating this final point again of the collective, right? It really does take a village, as you mentioned, as I mentioned earlier in the opener. and we all complement each other in various aspects. Each organization provides their own area of expertise, area of specialization, right? And it's a holistic framework to health and wellness, really shaping around the vital
Absolutely.
conditions, the federal framework, right, of health and wellness that the Inland Empire has adopted to serve its community. So we want to service that whole wheelhouse, right? And in the center, it says, if you have good housing paired with all these other things, right? There's a sense of pride and belonging in your community. And that's what we want, right? We want to retain our community. We want them to be proud that they're here in San Bernardino and being supported while they're here, and whatever lens of support that may look like for that household.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
And Parker, we're about to wrap up this interview. Can you let folks know, please, how they can reach you and the Rainbow Pride Youth Alliance organization, if you don't mind sharing your company website and contact information, please?
Yeah, thank you, Ruben. So folks could find me at Parker at RPY.health or clinical services at RPY.health. And our website is rainbowprideyouth.alliance.org. And please follow us on Instagram as well at RPY.us.
Parker, thank you again for your time and energy today and conducting this fireside chat. And we're looking forward to hear from the Launchpad team and furthering our collaboration with the RPYA team.
I'm really looking forward to it too.